All right, here's our video today, quantum biology. What is quantum biology? We know what biology is, right? It's the study of life. But quantum, it's a strange word. And quantum is the science of the subatomic world. What happens in the quantum world doesn't happen in our world. Things happen in the quantum world that are strange, and we'll talk about that in the video. So let's get my pen going here. We'll write quantum. You probably heard about quantum mechanics. So it's not Newtonian physics from Isaac Newton. No, it's quantum physics, in a sense, which you'll learn in college. And you probably touch upon it in high school. But all your life, when you're going to school and into college, some people, when they first take physics, it's Newtonian physics. It's Isaac Newton. It's the physics of our world, not the subatomic world. So it's the science or the physics of the subatomic. So below atoms, subatomic world, not worlds, or worlds, whatever. So if we take, let's say we take hydrogen, for example, make a little Bohr model of hydrogen. It has one proton and it has one electron. That's hydrogen. That's all it is, right? So the electron, right, electron up here. The electron has a negative charge and the proton has a positive charge. So electrons and protons, and if we go into heavier elements like helium, has neutrons. And inside the proton, there are quarks. There's 3 quarks inside a proton and neutron. But we'll also talk about light. And specifically, we're talking about photons because they're quantums. They're packages of light. So that's what we're going to talk about. So in this video, we'll talk about how quantum mechanics, how this works with biology. And specifically, we'll talk about photosynthesis. So let's get to it. All right. And I'm sure we know about photosynthesis. It's when, the sunlight, the plants and algae and some bacteria, by the way, they use sunlight that can convert light energy from the sun into chemical energy. So let's write that down. So and these are the photons. There's all these photons hitting the leaf. So right over here that, in photosynthesis, I'm writing a little crooked today. In photosynthesis, we have light energy, those photons, being converted to chemical energy. A little blurry today, right? What's going on? So light energy being converted to chemical energy. And basically, and this is just a basic, the plants are trying to make glucose. And with the glucose, they're going to make ATP. And we do this too. When we use food, right? They make their own food. They're producers. And that's really the goal, is make this energy ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. That's the simple definition of what's happening. But we're going to talk about these photons hitting this leaf and the quantum part of photosynthesis. So let's clear that out. Now, photons, like I said before, the photons are quantum particles. And they are light. And some flowers, some plants will take ultraviolet light also. Right? But for the most part, they're taking visible light from the spectrum of the red waves and blue waves. We know they don't accept green wavelengths because green wavelengths are absorbed back to us. So these photons, and we're talking about a lot of photons. So these photons, but let me write it out to show you. Well, I'll just write it. 10 quintillion. quintillion. Spelling it right here. 10 quintillion photons are hitting one leaf. Right? That's amazing. That's like a 10 with 18 zeros, right? All those photons, and they left the sun. They left the sun 8 minutes ago. 8 minutes and 20 seconds. The sun's 93 million miles away, give or take. That's the average. Right, miles away, 93 million miles away. So in that photon, which left the surface of the sun, well, it's not the surface of the sun, but it left the sun 8 minutes and 20 seconds ago, came to Earth, and now it's hitting the leaf, and there's 18 quintillion of them. But the plant will only use about 1 to 2%, which is fine. That's all they need. And that comes out to about 200 quadrillion if you're doing the math. All right, now we have all these photons hitting the leaf, and they're going to hit the energy center for the plant. For us, it's the mitochondria. For the plant, though, they have chloroplast, and that's what you're seeing here. Seeing this, get my pen going. You see the chloroplast in the leaf. And inside, as you can see, this is a cutaway inside the chloroplast. You see these kind of like stacks of green pancakes. And as you can see here, the thylakoid, there's stacks of thylakoids, right? And a stack is called a granum. And that's really not. So what's important now is inside this thylakoid, they have these pigments. And you probably heard about these pigments because we have chlorophyll in the pigments. And by the way, inside the thylakoid where these pigments are found, something caught in my throat there. So the lumen is inside the thylakoid. So these pigments, they didn't even finish writing it. These pigments, as we know, are like chlorophyll. And so the photons are going to hit these pigments. And when they hit these pigments, they're going to excite electrons. So we're getting closer to quantum. So let's write some of this out. Let's use blue here in these pigments. So like I said, inside this Girl Scout cookie, whatever it looks like to you, pancake, the thylakoid membrane, right? We have chlorophyll. Gives the plants that green color. And there's chlorophyll A and B. It's really not important here. But so this photon, we'll pretend the photon's a ball, even though it's not exactly a particle like that. But let's say the photon hits the pigment. It hits the pigment molecules. And it's going to excite an electron, sorry. So the photons, we'll just say the photon, it's going to excite an electron, a negative charged electron. And this is where quantum comes in now. Let's show a picture of that. So here we go. And make sure our pen's working. So as you can see from the sun, the photon hits the chlorophyll in the chloroplast, in the thylakoid membrane. And the electron is going to jump to an excited state. So let me use an analogy with something, and we'll come back to that when we talk about quantum. So imagine let's say we have an area. Let's say you were in, my pen's not working again. Let's say you were in an area, we'll call it A, and you want to get to an area B. Now in our world, you would just travel to B. But imagine an electron, I have that little dot there being an electron, going from A to B without going through this area, this space. So it's going from A to B. It's like appearing in B without going through the space to get there. That's quantum. It's going to get a higher energy level. Imagine that if you give someone candy, you give a child candy, the analogy where they have all that sugar and they get a sugar rush and they're full of energy. Well, that's what happened when the photon hits the electron. It's full of energy. It's going to reach a higher energy state. and it's going to get to that state without going through any other layer. So I'm going to draw you a Bohr model here. So we have these, what we used to call rings and orbits. You probably read about this and learned about it in school. It's kind of a Bohr model. Let me give you a better Bohr model. All right, and here's gold. And this is, they call it a Bohr model after Niels Bohr. He created this kind of a model that we can learn from in school, even though it's not correct because the electrons they're not traveling around the nucleus, as you see here, like a planet travel around the sun. But nevertheless, these rings, as you can see here, the gold has 6 orbits, which we call clouds or rings, or their energy levels. So imagine that we have an electron here. Let's say there's this electron here that's in this energy level. It's going to get excited when a photon hits it. We'll say this photon in yellow. This photon hits it. And it's going to jump up energy levels. And if it goes from, let's say, energy level 1 to, let's say, energy level 5, let's say, it will not pass the other levels. It will just appear from one level to the other. And that's quantum. That's the strange part of quantum. All right, let's get back to photosynthesis. All right, so back to this again, just to review the photon, it enters into the chlorophyll from the chloroplast, the pigment molecule, and it's going to excite an electron. And I'll circle the electron. Here it is. As I said, it's going to go into a higher energy level on the proton, on the electron, on the atom. And of course, this is a word here, photoexcitation. Excitation. That's the process. And once the photon releases all its energy, it basically dies, even though it's not alive. The photon dies. So all those photons, remember we said those the 200 quadrillion photons hitting, well, not just hitting, but entering into the plant, they're all sacrificing themselves in a sense. And that excited electron now, this excited electron is going to go through a series of steps and is trying to get to one area in the plant. And from there are so many other processes. And we're almost at the other part of the quantum. And it's going to be called quantum coherence. So we're almost there. Hold on. So in this picture, you see this thunderbolt. It's supposed to be the photon. The photon is going to go excite an electron in the pigment molecules, right? In the chloroplast, in the thylakoid membrane. And you see on the bottom it says lumen because that's the inside of the thylakoid. And these pigment molecules are going to get excited. Its electron's going to be excited. And you can see it's making all these pathways. It's trying to get to the reaction center. And this is important because the reaction center is where they're going to use all that energy that they got from that photon. They're going to use it so then they can now make their end goal is to make that ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Of course, they have to make glucose first. Now, here's where quantum's coming into the picture again. So we talked about quantum before, but this other one in quantum coherence, this electron has to get to the reaction center in a picosecond. That's a billionth of a second. And there's so many pathways to get to the reaction center. So it's like this. Imagine that you're in this maze. Think of a rat in a maze. When a rat or a mouse is in a maze, it's trying, I don't know if maybe you're in a cornfield maze. You're trying to find your way out. But imagine you only had limited time to get yourself out. That's what's happening with the electron. It has very limited time. Like I said, a picosecond. As a picosecond to get from here to there before it loses its energy. And the only way it's going to do it is through quantum mechanics, quantum coherence. So think of the reaction center as the power station where they're going to use the energy from the electron to further get that glucose and that ATP. And after the reaction center is where CO2 and water come in. Because remember, that's also part of photosynthesis. But that's not what we're talking about in this video. Only quantum. So here's our friend, Mickey. Doesn't look like Mickey, right? A mouse think of the mouse now in this maze trying to get its way out. And this mouse is smart. It's standing up. Looks like it's in some cubicle in some customer service center. But it's standing up and it's trying to figure it out, right? Imagine the electron trying to get through this maze in a picosecond. Well, now in quantum coherence, let's write that down. Quantum coherence. Think of the mouse. Imagine if the mouse was in every pathway possible. Imagine the mouse can explore every pathway simultaneously. The multiple pathways. That's what the electron is doing when it's trying to get to the reaction center. Right? That's not in our world. We can't think of that. Imagine we can be in multiple places to figure out the best solution to our problem, the best pathway, the best road. So again, in quantum coherence, if we use an analogy with the mouse is exploring multiple pathways to find the least resistance and the most favorable way out so it doesn't use all its energy. And that's what the electron is doing, trying to get to the reaction center in biology. So we mentioned two ways in which quantum mechanics is used. We mentioned the fact of a electron appearing in higher energy levels without crossing the space between those energy levels. And that's like saying if you were passing a ball to someone, let's say you have a circle of friends and they're so far away that you don't have enough energy to throw a ball to reach them. Imagine that the ball goes from your hand and then appears in their hand, in your friend's hand, without the ball going from you to your friend, the space between. That's happening in biology and photosynthesis. And then quantum coherence. So that's two points that we can talk about of quantum biology, and there's many more that we'll also look at in other videos. By the way, I'm sure if the mouse smelled cheese, maybe it will find a favorable outcome too. All right.